Hi guys, today we are doing 1-2, which is understand irrational numbers. And today we're going to make a graphic organizer about the real number system. So what we're going to do is I'm going to use a marker so that's a little darker for you guys and you can see a little bit. But we're going to do a graphic organizer about the real number system. And basically, it's going to have like two rectangles next to each other. One's going to be larger than the other. So go ahead and help yourself by drawing your rectangle. We'll do one large one on the left and then a smaller one on the right. So there you go. On the left-hand side, you guys can, we're gonna do some internal rectangles as well. So we're gonna do a few inside. So this is one. It's like rectangle inception. We're gonna do another. And then we're gonna do one more after this one. Okay, so we're going to do 3 additional rectangles inside to kind of start off our graphic organizer. Please make sure that when you do this, you have space to write just like me. All right, so now we're going to talk about the different types of numbers that we've seen and grown up with throughout our time in our math education. And basically, all of these numbers, most of the time, are numbers that you've seen before. And they're called the real number systems. There are all real numbers. We have numbers that are imaginary numbers, but you will learn that in high school. So when you guys were young and you started learning about what numbers were, you just started counting things, right? So you would have pens and pencils and you would count and you'd be like, okay, 1, 2, 3. And so you would just start counting things in preschool and kindergarten. So those are called natural numbers. So that's going to be what we put down in our very smallest of boxes. And that literally is your counting numbers. So you start with 1, 2, 3. You start counting with your fingers. So those are your natural numbers. Then when you guys started getting older, we were taking things away. So you would say, hey, I have 3 pens here and I gave 1 to each of my 3 friends. Well, how many do I have left? Oh, I have 0 left. Okay, so you started doing simple math problems, and you started learning that 0 was a number. Okay, these are called your whole numbers. So that's your second area that we've learned about in our math education. And the only difference between natural numbers and whole numbers is that number 0. So whole numbers include the number 0, so we also go on with 0, 1, 2, 3, so on in that pattern. When you guys started reaching middle school, you started learning that, hey, I can actually do 7 minus 10. There's a whole other part of that number line, and it becomes a negative number. So those numbers that you guys were learning about are actually called integers, where you learned all of your integer rules. And so instead of just having positive numbers, you also learned about negative numbers. So that's going to give you all of those negative solid numbers on top of the whole numbers. Okay? So we're expanding our math knowledge. The final side over here of the real number system that you guys have learned about are numbers called rational numbers. And rational numbers involve all of these numbers down here. We've already learned these, so these are included in rational numbers, as well as the different other parts. So fractions. We have repeating decimals. Okay, and we'll write some examples down. Okay, so those count. So we have like -2/3. We have 0.5 5 repeating, and that line above the 5 means it's repeating. Another thing, that way to show repeating is an ellipses, which is 3 dots. So I did 0.23 dot dot dot. So what this means is it's 0.23, 23, 23, 23. That pattern goes on forever. Okay? So you also have those. So you have positive and negative fractions and repeating decimals. Okay? You do have your integers, whole numbers, and natural numbers. If I were to ask what number, what type of number is 1, 1 is not only just a natural number, it encompasses all of this. You build out. So a 1 would be a natural number, a whole number, an integer, a rational number, and a real number. It encompasses all of that. If I asked about -5, -5 would start at integer, because that's when we started learning about negative numbers. So a -5 would be an integer, a rational number, and a real number. So you just work your way up. Aside from this side of our number system, we also have this extra piece over here. These are called irrational numbers. These are the opposite of rational numbers. These are irrational, okay? If you're irrational, you don't really know what to expect. For rational numbers, we know what to expect. We have a repeating decimal. We know how it's going. Irrational numbers, these are decimals, okay? And they never repeat. So they're the opposite of rational numbers. So these are repeating, these never repeat. They also never terminate, okay? And make sure you write the word terminate here. This is a good vocab word for math. When something terminates, it ends, okay? So over here, I can add that a simple decimal like 0.7, that's a terminating decimal. That's one that gets to stay over here. Never terminating is a decimal that goes on forever, but it also never repeats. A very good simple example is the number pi, okay? The number pi is 3.14159, and it goes on forever. But it doesn't repeat and it doesn't end. That's an irrational number. We also have other patterns that might show up. So we have patterns like this one over here that shows 1 0, 1 1 0, 1 1 1 0. So and that will go on forever because of this ellipses, the 3 dots. So that is a pattern. We know how it's going to continue, but it does not repeat actual numbers. It repeats the pattern and it never ends. We also need to include non-perfect squares. The square root of 6 is not a perfect square. If you put it in your calculator, it would be a decimal that never repeats and never terminates. If I did the square root of 25, that's a perfect square and the answer is 5. So that actually counts as a natural number over here, which also again includes whole number, integer, rational, and real numbers. Okay? So you have your rational numbers. These are numbers we've been dealing with throughout our whole entire math education. Irrational numbers might be numbers we've seen before. We're going to start getting more into these. All of these numbers listed here are also under the umbrella of a real number system.